The films of Quentin Tarantino. You may love them, you may hate them, you may love him, you may hate him, but there's no denying what he has done for cinema in the last 20 years or so. I'm Jim, this is JimFLIX, and today I will be ranking and rating the films of Quentin Tarantino. So, Quentin Tarantino and me and Quentin Tarantino. I don't want to say a love-hate relationship with Quentin Tarantino. I think it's a bit more of a love, partially dislike relationship with Quentin Tarantino. I appreciate the man himself. I think some of his views on films and filmmaking are incredibly interesting. I loved his book, Cinematic or Cinema Speculation. Apologies if I'm getting that wrong. I watch loads of his interviews. He's introduced me to untold amounts of cinema that I may not have been aware of or stumbled across. We share some of the same sensibilities in terms of film. I love 70s exploitation, blaxploitation, a lot of the old martial arts films I love. He's a very interesting character and he has made some incredible films. But in my opinion, he has also been responsible for some pretty bad films. And I do think that he hasn't necessarily entirely fulfilled his potential as a filmmaker, in my opinion. Again, this whole thing is absolutely in my opinion. So don't get mad, or do, and comment below. That's fine. But I'm very on and off with Quentin Tarantino. And so that is what led me to this point today where I'm filming this video. I want to rank all of his films and just say something briefly about each one, why I liked it, why I didn't like it, why I'm giving it the rating that I am, and just a bit of a chit chat with you out there. So sit back, relax. We're going to go from worst to best and just say a little thing about each film as we go through them. I'm going to consider Kill Bill one film. Quentin Tarantino considers it to be one film, so I'm going to do the same. And so obviously there's 9 films that we're going to be discussing. And number 9, the worst Tarantino film, as far as I'm concerned, is unsurprisingly and obviously Death Proof. This film was not great by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, some may like it. Personally, it was just incredibly disappointing. I was quite excited when he announced the film, going, with the kind of the grindhouse angle, but I think it just ended up being a little bit of a mess, to be honest with you. The original idea of having it as a double bill with the Robert Rodriguez film, Machete, and then it eventually cutting the film in half, and they both just had their own individual films and more shots were added, and it was just a whole big mess. I loved the look of some of it, the grain, the imperfections in the film itself, some of the other kind of grindhousey-esque elements, but I think the film itself was very disappointing. And I think this was a turning point for Tarantino, in my opinion. I think that with the success of his early films, his first 3 films, obviously Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction and Jackie Brown, I think when he came out with Death Proof, it was a little too indulgent. I think he had too much faith and belief in his own abilities, and I think that he essentially just thought that he could deliver a very niche kind of style of film to people and that they would just watch it, lap it up, enjoy it, love it, because he was Quentin Tarantino. And I think he kind of overreached a little bit. The film just didn't work. And I think the backlash from there did affect the rest of his career. And in my opinion, kind of sent him slightly off course. Again, just in my opinion, who am I to judge such an incredible director as Tarantino? But there you go. So film number 8 on my list may surprise some people, but I'm giving this to Django Unchained. I didn't really like this film at all, to be completely honest with you. I just really didn't resonate with me. I think some of the performances were great. Christoph Waltz, obviously, and Jamie Foxx was pretty good. A little bit forgettable, in my opinion, just kind of average. DiCaprio was great, a really brilliant, evil, odd character, and I think that the Samuel L. Jackson character was great, and the unlikely use of Samuel L. Jackson, particularly for Tarantino. But all in all, I mean, in a nutshell, I've watched the film twice, I think, and I just can't ever see myself watching it again. I don't see why, in my opinion. I just really didn't like it. I thought that it was just kind of loose, kind of baggy, which is a problem I have with a few of his films. Just very average, just really average, in my opinion. Some of the camera shots were great. The film looked amazing, obviously. I appreciate the fact that he filmed it on film, but really didn't really didn't do very much for me at all. I just didn't really invest in the characters too much. I've somewhat enjoyed it as a one-off watch. You know, it's not awful, but it was just very, very plain, in my opinion. Which brings me on to film number 7 on my list, which is Kill Bill. The film that followed on from Death Proof, and not a favourite of mine by any means. I appreciated the references to the Shaw brother kind of film franchise, if you will. I thought that some of the performances were okay, but to me the film was just a little bit kind of indulgent. The violence wasn't a problem, but I did think that it was a little bit, I don't want to say over the top, but it didn't necessarily feel earned. I think in a lot of other Tarantino films, particularly the first 3 films, violence came at certain points in the film and it had impact. The use of dialogue, the slow build to the point where there was suddenly some violence, just gave you a great contrast, and it gave the violence a bit more impact. Whereas this film, Kill Bill, a little bit too actiony as far as I was concerned, a little bit, dare I say it, a little bit shallow, a little bit hollow, just not my bag really. And I do love a lot of the Shaw Brothers films. I love a lot of kung fu and samurai films, but this one for me just didn't really work entirely. It's all right. I've watched it a couple of times. There's a chance I may watch it again. I know that he's releasing The Whole Bloody Affair, which is basically both films together, I think completely uncut and I think completely colorized, because a lot of the black and white was to get it past the censors. So I think I will watch it. Maybe I'll think a little bit differently about it, but it never got me, that film. Which brings me on to probably the most controversial ranking decision that I've made, and that is number 6. And I'm going to give this one to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I know will surprise a lot of you out there. Some people may be infuriated by that choice, but for me, I wasn't in love with this film. And this is where we're moving towards some of the Tarantino films that I really do like. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is almost... It has a lot of elements that I loved, but it had quite a lot of things that I really didn't love. Unfortunately, the things that I didn't love about the film are problems that do affect the overall film, which primarily are the fact that his films just... or a lot of his films rather, just seem very, very baggy. There is just so much in some of these films that just really should be left on the cutting room floor. All of the Bruce Lee stuff just seemed pointless and just really slows down the action. Some of the DiCaprio scenes, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there are a few scenes which could be trimmed, I think. And the bit with like Brad Pitt on the rooftop, that just seemed completely unnecessary and just somewhat of an indulgence. I mean, It's odd because all of his films look fantastic, and he just has a certain style, which I think is really important for a filmmaker. You can just put on a Tarantino film, and you know it's a Tarantino film. But these, it just destabilizes the whole thing when you have these just big chunks that just shouldn't be there. You know, once you sit down to watch a film, it's like you're on a roller coaster. Even if the film's slow, for example, I mean, like Lawrence of Arabia, which is one of my all-time favourite films, is very long, very slow, very disciplined, but it doesn't have much in there that doesn't need to be in there. Whereas with a lot of Tarantino's work, I feel there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't need to be in there. I think he's kind of addressed this himself a little bit and said that sometimes he finds it hard to rein himself in and be that disciplined in the way that maybe he should. But I think that his films would benefit from just being trimmed right down and being tightened. And I mean, Stanley Kubrick, one of the greatest directors of all time. His films weren't necessarily short, but he was just ruthless in his editing. He just really chopped it down to the absolute essentials, which I think is really important in filmmaking. And for me, I think that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a great example of this because the film could have been incredible. I think that parts of it are incredible, but those somewhat indulgent scenes and those baggy scenes and lingering scenes that I don't think need to be there, or at least should have been really trimmed down, really hinder the overall experience, in my opinion. But, I mean, it is fantastic. The acting, DiCaprio and Brad Pitt are just incredible. But overall, I'd say that is a love-hate one, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This moves me on to the next film, and from this point onwards, I think I'm going to be a little bit more positive and probably have a lot more good things to say about the films and of Tarantino. Number 5, The Hateful Eight. Now, I really enjoyed this film, if I'm completely honest. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. It looked gorgeous, looked so good, and I just appreciated everything about the film. Which is funny because it did have some of the same problems as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. A lot of stuff could have been trimmed, could have been cut out entirely. But for me, it didn't hinder the experience in the same way or to anywhere near the same degree as it did with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The film did move along. It did have some intrigue. It did have an element of mystery. I was invested in the characters, invested in the story, and for me just worked much, much better than Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And I really did enjoy The Hateful Eight. I've seen it a couple of times. I'm absolutely going to see it again. The score as well. The score was great. Ennio Morricone. And the widescreen just looked unbelievable. So, yeah, The Hateful Eight, very, very good. Next, we're getting to the sort of top 4, and all of these I have a lot of positive things to say about. Number 4, Inglourious Basterds. This film is fantastic. From the beginning to the end, it worked for me. It didn't feel like there was stuff in there that didn't need to be in there to anywhere near the same degree as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Kill Bill, the rest of them. It's just an absolutely fantastic film. The acting is great. The casting was fantastic. The cinematography was gorgeous. The opening scene is just incredible. Absolutely unbelievable. Christoph Waltz just so engaging, so watchable, and really made this film for me. I think the story was brilliant. I've watched it a handful of times and I will absolutely be watching it again. I think this film was a real return to form for Tarantino after Death Proof and Kill Bill. I think this was a taste of the old Tarantino. I think it is the best of later Tarantino. So, yes, Inglourious Basterds, absolutely fantastic. Love the film. I'll be watching it again, probably on a few occasions, and that gets another double thumbs up. Now, top 3. All three of these films, I want to say, are absolutely incredible, amazing bits of work. These were the three films that he made before Death Proof, and I think that this is real vintage, proper Tarantino. I remember when all these three came out, and they were just next level smash hits, really distinct style, and just brilliant films. Third of which, number 3 on my list, my third favourite Quentin Tarantino film, I'm going to give this one to Reservoir Dogs. I've watched this film probably 5 to 10 times, incredibly performed, fantastically written, it just exploded on the scene, and Tarantino just shot into the stratosphere in terms of fame. It's real proper Tarantino, this film. The score is amazing. Michael Madsen it's his defining role. It's probably the best Michael Madsen role there ever was. Tim Roth is great. I loved the story. There was nothing in there that shouldn't be in there. It grabbed you from beginning to end. This is the best of Tarantino, it's the best of Tarantino. These three films potentially could be interchangeable on any given day of the week. This is just how I've ranked them for this video and how I feel at this point in time. So number 3 on the list, again, Reservoir Dogs, a all-time classic. So we're down to the top 2. These can be interchangeable, and I think a lot of diehard Tarantino fans will be surprised at one of the two that are to come. You probably know what they are by now at this point, and my placing of them is what I think will be a surprise. Number 2, the second best Tarantino film as far as I'm concerned. Disclaimer as well, again, I mean, these two really could be interchangeable. I think I actually do kind of like them evenly, but this is a ranking video. So number 2, Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction is obviously the one for a lot of people and kind of the one for me, but I'm putting it at number 2 today. And I think the only reason I'm putting it at number 2, I'm going to explain when I rank the first film, but it's just to do with the storytelling, I think, and the performances. So a criticism of some of the other Tarantino films is the dialogue. I think in the first 3 films, the dialogue was quite novel, really worked very, very well, but then I think maybe from Kill Bill onwards, I found that some of the dialogue was a little bit, I can't even think of it, kind of cliched, kind of had a gimmicky element. It didn't stand out in the way that it did in the first 3 films that he made. Just didn't quite work in the same way. That's why I think that Inglourious Bastards I was so happy with, because to me it didn't have the same style of dialogue that I think Django Unchained, Death Proof and some of the other films had. It wasn't quite as distinct. Some people have said that the dialogue on all the characters just sound like Quentin Tarantino, but I think for the first 3 films that style worked. So my second favourite Tarantino film, again, is Pulp Fiction. Incredible storytelling, amazing exuberance, great energy, a classic, so many beautifully crafted scenes and themes and sequences and just fantastic moments. Pastiche worked for Tarantino beautifully in this film, where it was just dotted here, there and everywhere. You know, like the dancing scene is basically a homage to Fellini's 8½. Just the best of Tarantino, the absolute best of Tarantino. Bar one, which is some people's favourite Tarantino, a lot of people's worst Tarantino, maybe a controversial choice for my number 1, but my favourite Tarantino film, I think, at this point in time, is Jackie Brown. For me, Jackie Brown was the point in which I think Tarantino was at his peak of power. I want to say. The casting choices of Robert Forster, Pam Grier, Samuel L. Jackson, Robert De Niro was just brilliantly done. It really was. As with Pulp Fiction, it really was just Tarantino firing on all cylinders. He was using these, at this point in time, somewhat obscure actors like Pam Grier and Robert Forster. Not necessarily the most obvious choices, but they were just strokes of genius. There was nothing gimmicky about Jackie Brown, as with Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs. And Jackie Brown, for me, the reason I put it at number one was it just seemed to me to be a lot more of a complete film. It's kind of had all these Tarantinoisms within it. Like I said, the casting choices, the soundtrack choices, the pastiche, the kind of homages and references to old films and old works, but it just, the balance was there. There was nothing baggy about these films. Everything, and particularly Jackie Brown, everything was just to the point, exquisitely done, particularly the storytelling. And it was based on a film. This was a film that Tarantino adapted from a novel, which I think is an important point. I think if it had have had the success of his first two films, I think Tarantino's career would have potentially gone a little differently to the way it did, because I think that Jackie Brown was a turning point. He matured as a filmmaker. I think, again, this is the best film he made, but it wasn't a box office success. And I think it was seen by many as a little bit underwhelming, which I think was just because of the hype of the first two films and the kind of really concentrated Tarantinoisms, if that makes sense. And Jackie Brown was just a little bit more downplayed, a little bit more like, I want to say, a normal film, although all those Tarantinoisms were there. And I think from there he kind of regressed a little bit and kind of went a little bit extreme, let's say, with Death Proof. I think he had all the confidence in the world, but he was looking to do something maybe a bit different, a bit extreme, a bit kind of eye-catching, I want to say, with Death Proof. And I think that it didn't necessarily work, which, maybe snowballed after Jackie Brown, and that's where we ended up with Kill Bill and so forth and so on. So again, all of this is just completely my opinion. This video is really just a little bit of fun. I haven't wrote a script for this necessarily. I've just got the films listed here. So I've just kind of been rambling a little bit, and they're just unstructured thoughts and just my opinion on his films. I do love Tarantino. I think the world is a better place for him. I really appreciate knowledge that I've got from listening to his interviews, and I just really appreciate his passion for film. And all in all, Tarantino does get a big thumbs up from me. I think maybe the victim of his own success in some regards, but he's a legend, and he's put out a lot more. He's given a lot more to film than is taken away, so to speak. So going back through all of Tarantino's films, and I want to rate them because then you really get to see the range that we're looking at here. It's easy to rank films, but those films could be ranked, 8 out of 10, 7.9 out of 10, 7.8 out of 10. And in me giving you the rankings, it shows the range of how I rate each film individually. So, starting with number 9, that was Death Proof. I rank this film 5.8 out of 10. Bit of a shocker, but again, I really did not like this film at all, to be honest with you. It was not great, in my opinion, for me anyway. Number 8, Django Unchained. Again, I didn't like this film at all. I didn't just not like it much as a Tarantino film, just overall I really didn't like it, to be completely honest. So this one I'm going to rate 6.1 out of 10. Not a favourite of mine by any means. In fact, I do dislike this film a little bit. Number 7, a slightly more respectable score, although not great, Kill Bill. I will be watching this again when I get the chance to watch the whole bloody affair. And but at this point in time, based on the viewings I've had, I'm going to have to rate this one 6.5 out of 10. So not good, but things do get better, of course. Which brings me to number 6, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which does get a slightly better score. And we're moving up there a little bit. This one I'm going to give 6.8 out of 10. I did enjoy this a lot more than the previous films, but I think it did just fall slightly on the side of the issues mentioned. Number 5, The Hateful Eight, and this is where things get a little better as far as my list goes. I'm going to give this a solid 7.2 out of 10. So a decent score, a very good film. And next, this is where things really pick up. Number 4, Inglourious Bastards. This I'm going to rate 7.5 out of 10. I think it's fantastic. Really good film, really enjoyable. I've watched it before. I'm going to watch it again. And I'm sure I'm going to enjoy every minute of it as I'd have with previous viewings. Now, the big 3. Reservoir Dogs at number 3. I'm going to rate 7.7 out of 10. Quintessential Tarantino, say no more, fantastic film. Number 2, Pulp Fiction. This gets a score of 7.8 out of 10. In some cases, this is kind of my favourite Tarantino, but I think Jackie Brown just edges it. And to that point, Jackie Brown gets an excellent score, almost at 8, but not quite, 7.9 out of 10. So that was my rankings of all of Quentin Tarantino's films. I'm looking forward to number 10. I hope that he goes out on a bang, because I do really appreciate Tarantino, and I appreciate all of his works, even the ones that I didn't like. I applaud the effort. I could kind of see where he was coming from. He's bold, he's daring, he loves cinema. I love his enthusiasm, and this is again just my opinion. I think that he's done amazing things for film. So, Quentin Tarantino, thank you very much for all you have done for cinema. Keep filming on film, and I look forward to film number 10. So, I have been Jim, this was JimFLIX, and these were my rankings for all of Quentin Tarantino's films. Like and subscribe. Comment down below, rip me to pieces in the comments, feel free, that's absolutely fine. And also a disclaimer, like I think I mentioned, this was just purely off the top of the dome. I've got the films written down here, but I was just kind of rambling a little bit, so go easy on me, but feel free to comment. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.